Good evening, I'm Ian Hanomansing. Tonight, another senior military official, another allegation of sexual misconduct. He was supposed to be kicked out, but he was allowed to leave without consequences.
Somebody got a free pass.
A CBC News exclusive. Canada's COVID cases are finally falling.
Whatever's been done in the last few weeks has worked.
But inside some hospitals, a much different story.
This is truly an emergency.
And that means, for some, Thanksgiving is off the table again.
Some family members are like, should we follow the rules? Should we say the heck with it?
From outdoor dinners to unvaccinated guests, how to navigate a difficult holiday weekend. A prize guitar stolen 45 years ago is found.
Oh man, my guitar, I was in tears. I was like really moved.
How Randy Bachman tracked it to Tokyo. This is The National. Yet another development tonight in the sexual misconduct crisis in the Canadian Armed Forces. After months of allegations, investigations, and anger over the actions of several senior military officers, there are new questions about another case involving another senior member. This one is retired Commander Danny Croucher in Halifax. As Ashley Burke explains, after CBC News went looking for answers, the federal government launched a review into what happened when he was accused of wrongdoing and how he ended up working on the same base.
A review now underway at CFB Halifax into what went wrong. Who allowed Navy Commander Danny Croucher, accused of sexual misconduct, to leave the military without consequences and return to work in June at this exact same Navy base, but this time as a civilian.
Well, my reaction is, again? I mean, it shows such a lack of social intelligence, common sense, certainly awareness.
In June 2020, the military removed Croucher from his job as the head of the Navy Warfare School. Sources say he faced an investigation into allegations of inappropriate and hurtful comments said to be sexual in nature, and wrongdoing was found. Croucher was expected to be kicked out of the Navy, the sources said, but instead, the military granted him a voluntary release.
Somebody facilitated a release on request as opposed to a compulsory release as a result of somebody, in fact, who failed in his duty. In other words, somebody got a free pass.
The review is now probing if the military broke or flouted its own rules by allowing Croucher to avoid consequences for misconduct.
It shows clearly that we need to review how the military conducts investigations, how disciplinary issues are being investigated and punished.
This all comes on the same week the military issued an apology for its handling of Major General Peter Dawes' case. Amid another round of public backlash, the forces pulled Daw from his new job on the sexual misconduct file. He had quietly returned to work earlier this month after being put on leave following a CBC News report revealing he wrote a positive reference letter for a convicted sex offender.
I was stunned and dismayed.
The Prime Minister and his deputy criticized the military for its insensitive handling of the case.
This shows they simply still don't get it. We have an awful lot of work to do. We know that.
Actually, the official reaction to this story and the circumstances is really notable. And let's start with the Defence Minister.
Well, Ian, in a statement, the Defence Minister's office said it was dismayed and calls it an apparent lack of judgment. Harjit Sajjan was the one who asked the Acting Chief of Defence Staff and the Deputy Minister to trigger this review and determine if there was wrongdoing. If there is, the Defence Department said that there could be disciplinary action for those involved. Now, of course, this is all happening as the opposition is also calling for Sajjan to be replaced. And as for Croucher, he declined CBC's request for comment. Ian?
All right, Ashley, thank you.
Thank you.
After weeks of going from bad to worse, the Public Health Agency of Canada released modelling data that shows something we've rarely seen in the last few weeks: good pandemic news. According to the Public Health Agency, nationally, the rate of new infections is dropping, and if this current level of transmission continues, the agency predicts the COVID curve will continue to fall in the coming weeks. But if transmission were to increase by just 15%, the progress made so far will not last. Travis Danraj explains.
the efforts we've made.
Canada's top doctor says nationally we may be turning the corner on COVID-19, but
the curve is just bending. And if you're in some of the provinces in the middle of the country, you need to be really, really precautionary.
In provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta, vaccine hesitancy remains a major issue, a concern for Dr. Theresa Tam, who was also blunt in her assessment of those provinces for easing restrictions too quickly during the summer.
I would hope that if with this wave, that everyone has taken this to heart and that things can be really serious.
Despite that warning, Saskatchewan is not putting limits on Thanksgiving gatherings.
You can't just lift all other restrictions and rely on vaccination of an insufficient proportion of your population to drive cases down. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now in Saskatchewan and Alberta.
Infectious diseases experts say the gains made so far are fragile.
We have the winter coming up. So that's part of the reason why I think that we need to be prepared for potentially another surge. But I think in other parts of the country, they're seeing that Delta tends to find places that are susceptible to infection.
Overall, today's modeling was good news. Over 82% of eligible Canadians are now fully vaccinated. Nationally, case counts are leveling off. Still, many prepping for turkey and pumpkin feasts are making sure COVID considerations are also on the menu.
We're all getting tested ahead of time, and we're going to try and eat outside and try and, use the precautions that we can.
And according to experts, that is the right approach. Where gatherings are allowed, masks, social distancing, and small groups all need to be a reality for yet another holiday-long weekend during a pandemic that isn't behind us just yet. Travis Danrash, CBC News, Ottawa.
And while the national picture is brighter, different regions face different challenges. That record-breaking surge in the Northwest Territories is raging, and in the provinces there's quite a bit of variety. Looking at daily new cases per capita, Alberta and Saskatchewan are the hardest hit, but seeing declines. Quebec and Ontario have had milder fourth waves and slow, steady improvement. In most of the other provinces, the trend is less certain, but in Manitoba it's rising. And in New Brunswick, the surge is especially clear. New circuit breaker restrictions in that province kick in tonight. Those restrictions have effectively canceled large Thanksgiving dinners at home. Elizabeth McMillan shows us many in New Brunswick are adapting to the change.
Do you guys have your proof of vaccination and a government ID as well, please?
This New Brunswick restaurant will be offering a holiday special, and anyone who wants gravy and stuffing needs to show the paperwork. Staff are preparing to be busy.
Well, we'll start cooking turkeys for Sunday, Saturday through the night, and we'll cook turkeys right through until mid-afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Hopefully have enough turkey for all those that want to come in and share it with us.
This Thanksgiving, with few exceptions, no one in the province is allowed to socialize at home with anyone outside their own household. The Premier says restaurants can continue operating because they're screening people.
Social gathering of unvaccinated New Brunswickers is driving our current situation.
The number of COVID patients in ICUs is unprecedented. It's doubled in the past week. Health services reduced or suspended to deal with the surge.
People won't be able to visit loved ones in New Brunswick hospitals either. The only exceptions are when patients qualify for a support person, such as in palliative care or labor and delivery departments.
The new restrictions have derailed Thanksgiving plans, and fines for people violating the rules, a minimum of $480.
I have family members who want to gather, and some family members are like, should we follow the rules? Should we say the heck with it?
Very disappointing, yeah. I'm from Quebec, and I was going to go home and see my mom, and I can't. And my husband was going to go to Nova Scotia as well.
As nice as this restaurant is, it's not like sitting around the dining room table with all your friends and family enjoying a Thanksgiving meal.
For John Godfrey, the hope is the rules are another incentive to get vaccinated.
Let's get this dealt with and move on.
But the province won't be moving on until fewer people are getting sick. Restrictions in hotspots will remain in place for 2 weeks. Elizabeth McMillan, CBC News, Riverview, New Brunswick.
And for those who can gather this weekend, the official advice from health officers is to ask everyone if they're vaccinated. But for some families, that is leading to some difficult decisions.
we have made the tough decision that we will not have Thanksgiving dinner with them like we usually do every other year.
A little later, I'll chat with 2 Canadians about how they plan to navigate this weekend with their families. While the national rate of new infections may be dropping, hospitalizations remain a concern and in some places are still rising. Julia Wong spoke to a military nurse who's been deployed in places like Afghanistan and Sierra Leone and is now bringing relief to a hospital in Alberta.
The integration really has been seamless.
Major Amy Godwin says staff at this Edmonton hospital have welcomed her and 8 other military nurses with open arms. Alberta ICUs are packed mainly with COVID-19 patients.
Our job is to help Albertans, and that's something that we're proud to be able to do.
It's not just patients who need their help. The nurses' union had called on Premier Jason Kenney for some time to request federal help. It says every bit counts.
They may be working an 8 or a 12-hour shift, but they're not looking at 16 hours a day.
The Canadian Armed Forces is committed to 8 nurses for now. The nurses will be working 12-hour shifts day and night and are scheduled to be here until the end of the month. Dr. Darren Markland says the nurses are a morale boost, but he wishes Alberta's early reopening hadn't made them necessary.
8 nurses are fantastic, but it is a drop in the bucket with the numbers that we're seeing going in and out of this hospital and the resources that we've already taken from other critical services in this place.
Nurses in fatigues supporting an Alberta hospital, a striking image for this health policy expert.
It sends the message that this is truly an emergency, and it sends that message loud and clear.
As for Godwin, she served in Afghanistan and Sierra Leone. She's clear this deployment is no different.
Nursing is nursing, whether it's in an austere environment, an international operation, or domestically in Canada where you're posted or on a domestic operation. It's still, our key point of that is we're still nursing.
And even more help is on the way. A team of 8 doctors and nurses from Newfoundland and Labrador is expected to arrive in Alberta this weekend. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Sports fans in Ontario may be cheering tonight. The province is lifting capacity limits for some events starting at midnight. Venues such as Scotiabank Arena will return to 100% capacity ahead of the start of the hockey and basketball seasons. Proof of vaccination and masks are still required. Concert venues and movie theaters will also see their capacity limits lifted. Some good news for Canada's economy today. After September jobs boost pushed employment above pre-pandemic levels. Following a steep plunge at the beginning of the pandemic, numbers have been slowly climbing, but it was a surprise gain of 157,000 jobs last month that moved employment to levels not seen since February of 2020. Nisha Patel shows us what this means for an economy still working to recover.
When COVID-19 closed stores, Aaliyah Beckford lost her retail job. So she traded cash registers for computers.
It was the push I needed, so it was disappointing at first, but it was also very motivating.
She spent her lockdown hours retraining and completed a 9-week coding boot camp. It didn't take long for her to land a gig at tech startup CrowdRiff.
They have really great benefits that I didn't have when I was working in retail.
Tens of thousands of women came back to the workforce in September after bearing the brunt of job losses during the pandemic.
Considering where we were, especially last spring, that's really substantial progress.
And now, after 18 long months, Canada's employment numbers are back to pre-pandemic levels. Still, economists say there's work to be done.
We still cannot put our foot on the brakes economically. We have to be focusing on creating more jobs and better jobs so that we can have Canadians working back to their full potential.
Many employers have complained they can't find workers, especially for jobs in the services sector. So experts say some business owners may need to do more.
Push employers to improve the offer. They have to have better wages, more stable hours, better conditions. Then they'll be able to recruit and retain the workers that they need.
The Bank of Canada governor said he expects to see more job gains heading forward, despite any hiring difficulties.
Companies are looking for the right workers, workers are looking for the right jobs, and that process is taking some time.
For other workers in her position, Beckford has a message. It could be time to try something new.
Talk, ask questions, and just go for it. I'm really happy that I did it. I have no regrets.
An attitude that's helped reach this milestone on the long road to getting Canadians back to work. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
More than 130 countries, including Canada, have signed a global tax deal to make sure big companies pay a minimum tax rate of 15%.
This agreement at the level of the OECD is clearly a tax revolution.
The deal could generate about $150 billion in revenue per year and could take effect by 2023, but it still has to be approved by the G20 countries later this month. A bombing at a mosque in northern Afghanistan packed with worshippers has killed at least 46 people and injured many more. This is the latest in a string of attacks in the country. Susan Ormiston is in Kabul with the details.
Afghans are watching with increasing alarm. This is the third deadly attack in a week and by far the worst since the U.S. forces left this country just over a month ago. A suicide bomber targeted a Shia mosque in Kunduz in the north. It was packed for Friday prayers. About 1:30 local time, the blast tore through the interior and the hundreds of people praying. A man described the carnage. What I saw was like the end of the world, saying he couldn't even count the number of dead bodies that he'd transferred in his vehicle because there was no ambulance. The Taliban said it was sending in special forces to the area. Casualty numbers not confirmed, but according to the Taliban, more than 100 are dead or injured. ISIS-K has claimed responsibility, continuing a pattern of attacking Afghanistan's Shia minority. The UN said tonight that this latest bombing shows an overall disturbing trend, a pattern of violence here. Just last Sunday in Kabul, a suicide bomber killed 8, mourning the death of a prominent Taliban family member. And that night, Taliban leaders gathered at a hospital to visit the wounded, the next day launching an attack on an ISIS-K cell in the city. One of the reasons some Afghans supported the Taliban's takeover is they believed it would control the violence. And after promising it would contain internal terrorism, it seems to be struggling with that threat inside its borders. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Kabul.
When Afghanistan fell to the Taliban, Ottawa scrambled to evacuate residents who had helped the Canadian military during the war. It then pledged to resettle 40,000 other Afghan refugees. But as Evan Dyer shows us, that process is going much slower, leaving some very vulnerable people in limbo.
Afghanistan's collapse was so sudden, so complete. Hasina Muasser and her family barely had time to flee north to Tajikistan. Today, they're stranded there.
The doctors told me that I can't walk anymore, but I'm sure that I can. I need some support, some help.
Hasina wasn't always in a wheelchair. At age 12, she created a children's magazine. She met the president. Her work was covered by the BBC's Persian service. It was also noticed by the Taliban, who kidnapped her. Her brother Zubair says one of her captors tried to rape her.
That's why she tried to escape. And she ran towards the window, and she didn't know that's a building, so she fell down from 3 floors.
Losing the ability to walk didn't stop her activism, but the return to power of the Taliban has. Without medical treatment, she's at risk of losing a foot to amputation.
I want to run like everyone. I just want to
school.
Be healthcare. I just want to go to school.
Hasina's brother-in-law, Abdul, a former Canadian Army interpreter, is already in Toronto.
And I hear my brother-in-law told me that when you go to Canada, you can be here and you will walk again.
Unfortunately, there isn't a direct permanent residency path or any other program that is practical and provides an immediate solution.
Lawyer Argavan Jeremy is part of a Canadian Bar Association group trying to bring people to Canada.
What we would like to see is a program that they can directly apply to.
The government says it isn't just working with the UN to help people who've already fled Afghanistan. It's also stretching the definition of refugee to include people who weren't able to get out of the country. It's working with the US, NATO, and with an Irish aid group to help identify those people. But it's still not clear when the first refugee will actually reach Canada. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Gatineau, Quebec.
Two journalists have been awarded this year's Nobel Peace Prize, Maria Reza and Dmitry Muratov. They are from different countries, but as Briar Stewart shows us, they share a passion for a free press in nations where that can have severe consequences.
In front of Moscow's Novaya Gazeta, a memorial garden for Anna Politkovskaya, an investigative reporter whose murder remains unsolved 15 years on. I'm dedicating this award to Anna, Dmitry Muratov said, along with 5 others who worked at the paper and have been killed since it was founded in 1993. Back then, another Nobel winner, former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, used his prize money to set up the fledgling publication. Today, the Nobel Committee recognized Muratov, the paper's longtime editor. Muratov was so wrapped up in his work that he didn't answer the seemingly random calls he was getting from Norway to inform him he won. But when he heard the news, the celebration followed. Among the many congratulations today came one from the Kremlin. A spokesperson commended Muratov for being brave, which is of course highly ironic, given that there's an increasingly punishing crackdown on media in this country. For Novaya Gazeta's reporters, they hope the award can shield them at least temporarily.
Maybe it will protect us for a little bit, because it's just too weird to close the newspaper whose editor-in-chief is a Nobel Prize winner.
This year, the award also went to Maria Reza, who faced threats and jail time for her coverage of corruption and violence in the Philippines.
This is my 35th year as a journalist, and imagine the Philippine government filed 10 arrest warrants against me in less than 2 years. I've never lived through anything like that.
Reza says despite the risk, there's no better time to be a journalist because so much is at stake. But in Russia, Muratov isn't so sure. Today saying he can't encourage young people to get into investigative journalism because he fears just where the path could lead. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Moscow.
Next, People's Party leader Maxime Bernier on the future of his party after the election.
It's been described as racist, it's described as misogynistic, it's been described
but
as
that's not the reality.
What he says about threatening journalists online and being compared to Donald Trump. The Thanksgiving dinner dilemma.
I'm forced to potentially expose my girlfriend and myself to the virus because family members refuse to get vaccinated.
Navigating the holiday when your family is divided on the vaccine. And Randy Bachman tracks down his favorite guitar 45 years after it was stolen.
Oh man, my guitar, I was in tears. I was like really moved.
How he found it halfway around the world. We're back in 2. Welcome back. In New Brunswick, a coroner's inquest into the police killing of Rodney Levi has led to a number of recommendations, including police training on mental health calls.
We were all scared, nervous. We didn't know what to expect, but we got what we wanted, basically, except for our brother.
Other recommendations include establishing mental health centers on First Nations. Rodney Levi died last year after officers responded to a complaint about a man with knives. The union representing RCMP officers says it will support a member's right to refuse vaccination. That's in response to the federal government's announcement earlier this week that most public servants, including RCMP officers, must be vaccinated against COVID by the end of the month or face being put on unpaid leave. The People's Party may not have won any seats in last month's federal election, but support for the party more than tripled compared to 2019. Travis Danraj sat down with leader Maxime Bernier to talk about what's next.
We are the only real option for the future of this country. If you believe in a smaller government in Ottawa with more freedom, we are there for you.
Defiant even after defeat, Maxime Bernier says his battle is not over. In fact, he believes the election results were a win for his party.
We don't have anybody in Parliament, but we are the real opposition. If you look on all the ideas that we promote, we are the only real Conservative party in Canada right now. Thank you.
The People's Party of Canada captured about 5% of the vote nationally, damaging Conservative hopes in some ridings by attracting longtime Conservative voters like Rob Jonkins.
Because
They are against vaccine passports, and they are for freedom. I met him, shook his hand, had a couple-minute conversation with him. The guy is solid. The guy is solid. So I believed in him at that moment. He is who he says he is.
While the PPC was able to sway a significant number of more moderate conservatives, the party has been accused of embracing the far right.
It's been described as racist, it's described as misogynistic, it's been described
But
as
that's not the reality.
But when journalists asked about PPC connections to the alt-right, Bernier published their email addresses, making them targets for online abuse.
You go on Twitter and say they want to play dirty, we will play dirty too.
Yeah, but
why?
Instead of trying to have a debate on our ideas, they try to discredit us. So that's not the game that we'll play.
But anti-racism activists insist courting extremists is part of the plan for the PPC.
He demonstrated through his actions during the campaign strategies and tactics right out of the Donald Trump playbook. And that's, I think, what he is following.
Bernier doesn't see similarities, but also doesn't mind the comparison.
Maybe they like me because they think that I'm a little bit like Trump. And for us, there's no taboo subject.
Defying public health advice, not taboo for the PPC. Waging war on COVID restrictions was Bernier's main fodder.
You're not vaccinated?
No, I'm not.
Okay, and
I won't be.
You won't be?
Yeah.
So what if you need to travel?
But that's why I will fight against that, because my job as a politician is to travel across the country.
The pandemic will likely be behind us when we head to the polls again. The question is whether Bernier will find a new rallying cry that resonates with the right. Travis Stanraj, CBC News, Ottawa.
A lot of families will be grappling with whether to gather with relatives who haven't had their COVID shots.
I just can't have Thanksgiving dinner with people in a closed environment in my home that are not vaccinated.
Next, 2 Canadians share how they're navigating this complicated holiday. And later, scientists thought this video was lost. Now they're shocked it's been found. The moment it was discovered on the bottom of the ocean floor. That's coming up later. Welcome back. Thanksgiving has traditionally been a time for families to gather, but for a second year in a row, the pandemic is putting limits on that, and that includes the divide among families and friends when some are vaccinated and others are not.
We're keeping it to immediate family, plus our son and his girlfriend who live in a condo. We're all vaccinated and we're setting up outdoors anyway.
This Thanksgiving, I'm forced to potentially expose my girlfriend and myself to the virus because family members refuse to get vaccinated. And if I don't attend Thanksgiving out of protest, then I become the villain.
Vaccinations are not an issue on my side of the family. We're all fully vaxxed, and my 80-year-old father has had his booster. Other side of the family, not so much.
Thanksgiving dinner at our house will include only vaccinated guests, same as any other dinner during the pandemic.
So lots of different responses to what is for many a new challenge of this pandemic. As we do on Friday nights, let's go beyond the headlines. This week with 2 people who are having those difficult conversations with their family members. Jan Malcolm is in Surrey, just outside Vancouver, and Joe G is in Carlingford, New Brunswick. That is near the border with Maine. And thanks to both of you for joining us.
Good evening, Ian.
Thank you for having us.
Jan, you and your husband, I know, are vaccinated, but some close family members are not. And tell us about the rift that's created.
We all live in the same house. My husband and I own the house, and our family members are in a different part of the house in a suite. And they are dead set against the vaccination, and they're dead set against masks. And we have made the tough decision that we will not have Thanksgiving dinner with them like we usually do every other year.
And what are the conversations like, especially with Thanksgiving approaching, but even before, when you have that very sharp, I guess, ideological divide within your own home?
It was very tense. We felt we were bombarded, and we were told to do our own research. So we did, and I followed Dr. Bonnie Henry here in British Columbia. And while I don't agree with everything that she said and done, I do agree with the science that she has put forward. So I just can't have Thanksgiving dinner with people in a closed environment in my home that are not vaccinated.
Joe, you and your fiance are the only vaccinated ones in your family, and many of those unvaccinated relatives recently did get COVID, and your father died last week, which of course I'm sorry to hear. I mean, first of all, how are you holding up?
Well, it's tough, but there's so much to do that I just kind of focus on the things that I need to get done, and then I usually have my time at night, when I'm settling down and getting ready for bed. So.
And what are the conversations with your family members like, especially, in the wake of the passing of your father, and with Thanksgiving just a couple of days away? What sort of, are you having conversations with your family?
Yeah, there's two different conversations that I'm having, and communication has stopped with some family members, and then other family members. We're continuing conversations that are more, how are we going to prevent this from happening again? So it's difficult. A lot of these conversations started a year and a half ago, and in my family, it just seemed more like tribalism. It started out that the pandemic is fake, it's a hoax. And then there was a lot of logical fallacies like straw man arguments and false equivalencies that I was hearing from family members, and it created a lot of tension. It's challenging to try to maintain those healthy relationships when COVID-19 has pretty much, split the family in two.
I mean, all of this is so difficult, and I had a lot of people who sent me messages, direct private messages on Twitter, who are very much in the situation you guys are in, and some of them didn't want to talk about it publicly, and I understand that, and I appreciate the fact that both of you are. Jan, we only have maybe about a minute for this, but we heard this from Joe. What's the root, do you think, of the vaccine refusal on the part of your family members? Where is that coming from?
They believe different things than what the science is that we believe. I don't know that they believe that this is a hoax, but they have very out of this world kind of beliefs, and we had a big discussion when this first started about the mRNA vaccine, and what I was being told by my family member was not the science, not the biology that I believe. And so I went and researched, as I was said, go do your own research. So I did, and it's just totally different viewpoints on a whole lot of things. So we don't even talk about it anymore.
Yeah, and a lot of people are not going to be talking about it this weekend. Jan, you mentioned you're going to have a small dinner with your husband. Joe, we just have 20 seconds left here. What's Thanksgiving Day going to look like for you and your fiance?
We're going to cook Thanksgiving dinner, and then we're going to deliver it to some family members. It's going to be contactless, of course, and I'm just thankful that I have an opportunity to protect my community. And if that means staying home and spending Thanksgiving without all the traditions and norms and customs, then that's what we're going to do, because that's what's important right now.
Well, again, sorry to hear of your father's passing. Sorry to hear the turmoil that both of you are dealing with within your families. But I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to talk about it, because I think this reflects what's happening in a lot of homes across the country. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we come back, a movie about a dystopian future draws inspiration in Canada's painful past.
Who lives here? The city went dark after the war.
Using science fiction to tell the story of residential schools. Next. Welcome back. A new sci-fi film is shining a light on Canada's dark past with Indigenous people. Set in the year 2043, Night Raiders follows the life of a Cree woman and her fight to reclaim her daughter. Eli Glasner gives us a preview.
Only packed necessities.
In a forest outside Toronto, Cree warriors prepare to flee from government forces hunting children.
Soldiers on the perimeter.
It's fall, years before the pandemic, before discoveries at residential school sites reminded us of what was buried in Canada's past. We're on the set of the movie Night Raiders by Cree Métis director Danis Goulet. Set in the year 2043, the story takes place in a shattered nation.
Who lives here?
The city went dark after the war.
Where the state rips children from their families, forcing them into school.
No one can see your face.
Goulet says the sci-fi approach gives her more freedom.
It liberates you as a storyteller to come at things that you want to say. You can be as political as you want, and because you're in a totally fictional universe, you can say whatever you want to say.
And in this near future scenario, the Cree warriors, the Night Raiders, are fighting back. The film is part of something exciting happening with Indigenous movies.
Ain't nobody immune here but us.
Take the zombie thriller Blood Quantum. Or Slashback, an alien invasion movie shot recently in Nunavut.
We're on the precipice of a golden age of Indigenous cinema. These stories are really just starting to get, really massive platforms like our film is. And there's so many stories to be told.
Even on this wet, dreary day, you can see how the past and future collide as the teepee does double duty as a video village. Although the story is science fiction, the trauma it unearths is real, so they tread carefully.
It involves, approaching things with a lot of sensitivity. So we do smudging on set. We do many things to keep our actors safe because we know they're bringing their lived experience to the set.
Fast forward to a month ago, the soggy shoot days replaced with red carpet glamour as the Night Raiders arrive at this year's Toronto International Film Festival.
It feels amazing that we have the Night Raiders as our heroes.
I think there's a warrior in all of us.
How are you feeling right now? You look a little...
So ecstatic, I'm so excited right now.
The morning after the premiere, the director is still buzzing.
It was amazing. It was the first time that I'd actually seen it big with an audience, so I was just hanging off of everything in the movie.
But Goulet says they almost didn't get the green light because some broadcasters said what happened wasn't relevant.
We got notes back saying that it was a propulsive story with great characters, but they felt that the residential school allegory didn't work because as a country we'd moved on from that.
But that changed over the summer.
The BC First Nation announces a horrific discovery: the remains of 215 children who attended a residential school.
We really haven't grappled with the full truth of what's happening, and I think this summer has been a testament to that with what we've been finding out in the news about the graves of children. So we've got a long way to go.
The heart of Night Raiders is about a mom fighting for her daughter. Both actors playing those pivotal roles have felt the ripple effects of residential schools. For Brooklyn Letexier Hart, it was her grandmother.
When I got to the age about 11, 12, she started talking more about the trauma she went through.
For Elmaya Tailfeathers, her grandfather.
I know that he ran away from school too many times to count, and that it was a really hard experience for him.
As Night Raiders finally opens in theaters, for them it isn't about the pain of the past, but the resilience to move forward.
And I know that it was our culture and our ancestors and the strength of who we are as a people that kept us alive and got us through those violent systems. And so, Night Raiders is an allegory. It's a physical representation of that strength.
Touch our hearts and give our allegiance.
A vision of the future with a message for the present. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
The Mi'kmaq Honor Song has been played and performed for audiences around the world for years, but now it's found a place in cellist Yo-Yo Ma's new album. With Ma playing his signature instrument and Jeremy Dutcher providing the vocals. The collaboration began almost 3 years ago when Ma invited Dutcher to perform at a concert in Montreal.
I had like photo shoots and like some interviews booked that weekend, and I just had to say, well, sorry, you're gonna have to postpone a couple of those because this is a collaboration of a lifetime.
Dutcher says he'd only sung the song before in his own language of Wolusteguy, but recorded the opening verse in Mi'kmaq for Ma's album as a sign of respect to the original. A Canadian music legend is celebrating after tracking down a long-lost, prized possession.
It was like being hit in the face with a shovel. It's like, bam, oh man, my guitar. I was in tears. I was like really, really moved.
The story of how Randy Bachman found that guitar 45 years after it was stolen. That's right after the break. Rock and roll legend Randy Bachman's very first guitar was stolen from a hotel in Toronto more than 4 decades ago. And after searching for it all these years, he'll soon be reunited with his prized possession. Karen Pauls with how he found his guitar.
The guitar in this Bachman-Turner Overdrive song was the first one Randy Bachman ever bought, a 1957 Gretsch 6120, the Chet Atkins model in Western Orange. Bachman says he and Neil Young spent hours drooling over it in the window of a Winnipeg music store while he worked to save up for it.
I babysat. I had a paper route, getting up early in the morning, throwing papers in guys' yards, washed cars.
Bachman performed some big hits on that guitar, but in 1976, it was stolen from a Holiday Inn hotel room in Toronto.
I cried literally at night, I'd cry. I love this guitar so much.
Bachman spent years and a fortune searching for that guitar, buying up hundreds of them. And then, just recently, someone identified it in this video, shot in a Tokyo restaurant Christmas Eve 2019.
It was like being hit in the face with a shovel. It's like, bam, oh man, my guitar. I was in tears.
His soon-to-be daughter-in-law, Coco, reached out to the musician, Takeshi, who was born the year the guitar was stolen. He offered to make an exchange, the original guitar for another one built in 1957. There are fewer than 40, but Bachman found one in perfect condition.
And they were made basically in the same day or the same week on the same bench and put together at the same time.
In a statement, Takeshi said, "I'm so honored and proud to be the one who can finally return this stolen guitar to its owner, the rock star Mr. Bachman, who was searching for it for nearly half a century. And I feel very grateful for this miracle happening in both our lives." Bachman is now planning a trip to Tokyo to take care of some business, make the exchange with Takeshi, and then perform together. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Next, a long-lost research camera is found on the ocean floor.
After 3.5 years, I didn't really know what to expect.
How it was rediscovered and what it revealed. This footage was shot on a camera strapped to the back of a seal in Nova Scotia, but being able to view it, well, that's pretty amazing considering the camera spent 3 years lost in the ocean. The incredible recovery of that $10,000 camera and what the hours of footage revealed, that's our moment.
2017, we attached this camera to this male, and he went off to sea. Suspected the male had gone to a different breeding colony. And then by the time the breeding season finished and the male still had not reappeared, basically we said, okay, we've lost the camera. And then I just basically forgot about it. This year, I got an email from the company that makes this camera. They sent me pictures of this camera. And they said, do you recognize this camera? Is this one of yours? I was just flabbergasted. Eventually, I got hold of the camera. After 3.5 years, I didn't really know what to expect. The video shows this male swimming out at sea, and he was also interacting with this pregnant female. I think the male was actually quite close to Sable. So in a sense, he was just teasing me. You want this camera? Okay, come and get it.
So we're almost burying the lead here. How do they find the camera? Like, imagine the vastness of the ocean and losing it from a seal. Well, apparently a fisherman scooped it up in a net, took a look at it, saw the name of the company, called it, I think they were in Australia, and, reunited it with the scientist. What a moment. That is The National for October 8th. Join me Sunday for Cross Country Checkup on CBC Radio 1, and then later that night, right here for The National. Good night.